Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. My name is Luke Wolf. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get into it. Welcome everybody to the Wolf Den. This one is being recorded on the night of September 17th, and in this one, we're going over the panic button. We're taking every 0-2 team in the NFL and talking about if they need to hit the panic button or let this season ride out. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to watch till the end. All right, everyone, let's get right into this one. Today, what I have for you is a little thing I'm going to call the panic button. I'm going to be looking at the 0-2 teams so far and discussing whether they need to hit that panic button or not. There's a lot of 0-2 teams that still have hope, and there's a lot of 0-2 teams that might be time to pull the plug on whatever experiment they're in the middle of. It might be time to hit the panic button and change up something. We're just going to go through these 0-2 teams and see what's up with that. Starting with the Tennessee Titans, and this one isn't too much of a question. It's got to be yes. With the Titans, it is a weird one because you come into the season with pretty low expectations. This 0-2 was somewhat expected. You come in as a team that is expected to be a top 5 pick once again, with a new coach, a lot of new personnel, but the answer is still yes for me. The fashion they have lost their 2 first games in. In the first one, a 17-point lead, and then giving up 24 unanswered points to Chicago's defense, special teams, and kicker. Chicago did not have an offensive touchdown, and the Titans still managed to blow a 17-point lead. You go to this game against the Jets, and it was a close one. It was an extremely winnable game, and there's another Will Levis clip where he throws a fumble, and it's definitely time to pull the plug on Will Levis. He showed nothing last season, and this season, he's already showing worse than nothing. He's showing he's a big reason that you're losing games. And if the Titans end up with such a high pick, I wouldn't be surprised if they skip out on quarterback for one more year with how the class is shaping up right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if they took a quarterback because it's time to move on from Will Levis already. You look at Tennessee's team, and yes, their expectations were low, but when you bring in Calvin Ridley, you bring in Jamal Adams, L'Jarius Sneed, Ernest Jones, like you're bringing in some win-now talent. You're bringing in some win-now talent, which should have got you over the hump in these past 2 games, but you were being held back by your offense so much, and all of that revolves around being held back by Will Levis. And this new coaching staff, I'd give them time to settle in. I wouldn't fire them after the season, but they're not looking great just yet. So Titans, it's only week 2. Hit that panic button. I don't know what that looks like for you guys. Maybe start looking at the quarterback prospects. Maybe start looking at Ryan Tannehill and Desmond Ridder over in free agency. But this is going to be a rough season for Titans fans. On to the next team. We have the Indianapolis Colts keeping it in the same division, another 0-2 team, another team with 2 very winnable games. Once again, only 1 possession losses. And this is a weird one for the Colts because they're not a team that has high expectations from many. I'm a person who had pretty high expectations for them. I had them going 10-7, I believe. And a lot of that revolved around Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson isn't looking bad. I wouldn't say he's looking bad, but he's definitely not looking good. In the first game, I went over it in my last episode. I said, with 9 completions, you're not going to win games. he comes out against the Packers and he passes way more. 34 passes, 17 completions, but 3 interceptions. It's making me wonder, is Anthony Richardson actually going to be what is expected? Because so far he's shown that he can make big plays, and outside of that, he can't do much else. There's something that can be said for those big plays. Some of those deep passes he made in week 1 looked amazing. He can obviously do things on his legs, but other than that, what has he shown that he can do at an NFL level? And obviously, this is only his 6th game played, so he's still in that development phase, but you gotta wonder, coming into the NFL and being able to make the big plays that he can make, having the arm that he has, that should be a recipe for success, but he's shown that he can't throw the 5-yard, throw the 10-yard pass. He can't make the correct read, and eventually it'll catch up to him. That's what it's looking like. But it is only his 6th game. It is still that developmental phase for Indy. So I'm not going to hit the panic button on the Colts. Your season is not looking too great, but the AFC as a whole is kind of looking like a mess right now. So you're definitely not even close to being out of playoff contention yet. Anthony Richardson, most of what you want this season is just for Anthony Richardson to stay healthy and improve with the small things, because again, he's shown he can make a big play, hasn't shown much else. But for the Colts, you still have Jonathan Taylor looking very strong. You have Alec Pierce stepping up and making solid plays from that receiver position. You'd prefer if Michael Pittman Jr. was more involved, but he's definitely a guy that operates in that short to middle range of the field most of the time, and Richardson is struggling with that, so you're not worried about him. And the defense for the Colts is looking pretty strong. They did allow quite a few points to the Texans in week 1, but if you watch that game, the defense definitely didn't look terrible. It was just a lot of things kind of happening at once. And then they hold the Packers to only 16 points. Yes, they had Malik Willis, but still that Colts defense did look very strong against the Packers. And regardless of who's at quarterback, that is a strong offense. So I'm not hitting the panic button on the Colts, but Anthony Richardson's definitely got to step things up. On to the next team, we have the New York Giants. And another weird one, because what were their expectations? Right? It's hard to hit a panic button on a team we already thought would be bad. But they're somehow worse than I expected. I don't know how. But this Giants team, it's rough. Neighbors settled in week 2. He's looking pretty good. I'm a big fan of Malik Neighbors. At the end of the day, though, this team is doing nothing until Daniel Jones is not at quarterback. But you look at it, and it's just every aspect of this team seems to be failing. The play calling isn't great. The defense has got... I mean, they haven't looked good so far. Obviously, the offense isn't looking great. You can't get a run game going. The line is bad. Daniel Jones is bad. The coaching is even a question. Like, everything in New York just seems bad. You have a young star in Malik Neighbors. You have a strong defensive line. But outside of that, you have nothing on this roster. And it's a team kind of like the Titans, except I do think the Giants roster is worse, where I'm going to say, yes, hit the panic button. But what that looks like is probably not what the panic button for a lot of other teams looks like. This team had no expectations. This team was expected to be a top 10 pick. They just look worse than what was expected. We saw this team as a 4 to 6 win team, like still bad, but at least they were showing flashes, and they're just not. This team has shown nothing in these first 2 weeks. The loss to the Vikings are looking pretty good, so not thinking about that too much, but the way they lost to the Commanders was absolutely embarrassing. So The Giants hit the panic button, but again, what does that look like? I'm not sure, because it's probably a Titans-like situation where it's like, time to start looking at quarterbacks. Time to start... for New York, it's definitely time to start questioning Dable in that coaching staff, but there's not much else they can really do as of now. On to the next team. We have the Carolina Panthers, and yeah, talk about a team with low expectations. I don't like... This team is so bad. This team is so bad that, like, there isn't even a panic button. They hit the panic button, like, last season, 2 seasons ago, and it's stuck. Like, the button is stuck. It's just pushed down. Like, they can't get the button to come back up. Like, there's no button to press in Carolina. However, they somehow did get worse than what we expected. Derek Brown went out for the season, and now Bryce Young is benched. What is Andy Dalton really going to do for this offense? What's going to happen with Bryce Young? Is he going to be in the league next season? I'd like to see Bryce Young on a different team, because once you escape Carolina, anything's possible. But yeah, this team, there's not much to talk about. Carolina, you guys don't even get a button. There's no button for you guys. This team is trash. We knew that coming in, and nothing's changed. I guess they're not pressing it, but most of these teams that aren't hitting the panic button have something to look forward to, and I can't say the same about Carolina. So skipping past them, because, dear God. Going on to the next team, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is a team that I would say hit that panic button, because you just gave Trevor Lawrence so much money after he already barely proved anything, and now he's looking even worse. Now Trevor Lawrence is looking even worse than he was before. These first 2 games for Jacksonville have been a complete joke. Trevor Lawrence, when you pay a quarterback that much money, you are expecting an offense to move and a quarterback to look good. Trevor Lawrence has not done that. Trevor Lawrence hasn't done that whatsoever. The entire offense looks so bad. This is a team that has Christian Kirk, Gabriel Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne Jr. Trevor Lawrence has talent around him. He has talent to get the ball to. This offense just does nothing, though. They scored 17 against the Dolphins. That defense isn't too strong. Their second game, they play the Browns. That is a strong defense. They only put up 13. They lose that one. But again, when you give a quarterback as much money as you're giving Trevor Lawrence, your offense has to move, and it's not. Your defense is looking strong. 20 points for the Miami Dolphins. 18 points for the Cleveland Browns. And the offense is the issue? Again, you brought in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. Christian Kirk is still there. You have Evan Ingram. You have Travis Etienne Jr. And the offense is the issue? With your billion-dollar quarterback, your offense is the issue. I'm hitting the panic button on this team, because this team was a playoff contender. They were in the playoffs 2 seasons ago. Last year, they were a playoff contender. And now they look absolutely lost. This offense does nothing. This offense has talent, and it still does nothing. A lot of that revolves around Trevor Lawrence. A lot of that revolves around the coaching. Luckily for them, the rest of their division also looks like trash outside of the Texans, because this is the 3rd AFC South team we've had here. But I'm hitting the button on this team, because if Trevor Lawrence doesn't live up to what he's getting paid, Jacksonville is in the depths of cap hell for the next 5 years. The same thing we saw happen with the Giants and Daniel Jones is going to happen to Jacksonville, but 10 times worse, because Trevor Lawrence is eating up a lot of cap space. something's got to change. I don't know what. The offense just has to put points on the board. Luckily for them, that division, even if you hit the panic button, you still have a chance to do something. But this is a team that can't. This is a team that, the way it's built, can't really afford to keep missing the playoffs like this and keep grabbing pick 16, pick 17. It's not pushing you forward at all. I mean, Jacksonville might turn into the Steelers, because this team, I don't see it as a team to go under 500. I just don't see it as a team contending for really anything. So I don't know. Me personally, that makes me want to hit the panic button. I'm a hater of mediocrity and just being okay with mediocrity, and right now that is what Jacksonville is. On to the next team. We have the Denver Broncos. And this is a weird one, again, because the expectations were so low. You've heard it a lot, but a lot of the teams here are 0-2 for a reason. And the Broncos are using this season to really evaluate Sean Payton and evaluate Bo Nix. So far, Bo Nix has not looked good. So far, Bo Nix has not looked good whatsoever. He's thrown too many interceptions. He put 6 points up. 6 points up against the Steelers. I know that's a good defense, but 6 points? That's not okay. And for the Broncos, I'm not hitting the panic button just for the fact that this team is going to suck. It's the same thing as the Panthers. Like, this team's going to suck. We know this team's going to suck. It's just a matter of, you have this season. You have this season to progress Bo Nix. You're going to get a high pick. You better make the right pick. And then you have to start making some type of noise. Because this team isn't a good roster. But if you add a top 5 pick talent, your roster is somewhat serviceable. And then it's going to come down to, is Bo Nix good? And with how high you picked Bo Nix, he better be good. Because that was not a good pick. So Bo Nix better hit. Because I don't think he will. I did not like that pick. So I'm not hitting the panic button just yet. Because this was expected. In fact, the worst might have been expected for Broncos fans. But they don't have too long. And Sean Payton should be on the hot seat. There's not too much to talk about with this team. They're not, again, like a team expected to get a top 5 pick. I think in the last time I did a mock draft, I had like Mason Graham going there. So they're going to get a good talent, but most of the talent coming up in this next draft class is defensive. This defense hasn't been a huge issue just yet. Bo Nix needs to put more points on the board, and he has time to progress and put points on the board eventually. Which is why I'm not hitting the panic button. But by week 8, if you still can't put points on the board, that's when we start looking at it again. On to the next team. We have the Los Angeles Rams, and this is a team that my expectations were high for. If you watched my season predictions, I had this team going to the conference championship. I had this team as my dark horse Super Bowl winner. That was before Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua went on IR. That was before Ernest Jones was a Titan. Now what does this team do? Now who does Stafford throw to? Now this defense is going to get exposed way more than it did before. Because who's your playmaker on defense? The injuries have killed this roster. I don't know what their next move is, but it's probably going to come later in the season when Puka and Cooper are back. Because right now, Matthew Stafford will be throwing to Demarcus Robinson. That is going to be his number 1 receiver, is Demarcus Robinson. So, yes, you're hitting the panic button. Hopefully, Kyren Williams can do what he did last season, but last time when he ran the ball that much, he got injured too. So at this point, you hit the panic button, and you, I guess, just have an ambulance on site. I mean, your panic button is purely off of the fact that the injuries have happened. They played a great game against the Lions. They looked awful against Arizona, but what can you do when your two receivers are out? And again, that defense got exposed. This team is not going to have fun without those two. And their timetable for when they get back is pretty iffy right now. So yeah, you're hitting the panic button, unfortunately. This is a team that I had a lot of hope for. A team that I still think, if healthy, is one of the best teams in the NFC, if not the entire NFL. But they're not healthy. They haven't been healthy for 2 seasons now. So at what point do the Rams hit the true panic button, where they move on from some of these pieces? When do we move on from the Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp era? Because Cooper Kupp still has a lot of trade value to a lot of teams. Do you trade Cooper Kupp? Do you trade Matthew Stafford and start to build around Kyren Williams and Puka Nacua? Bring in a new quarterback? There's a lot of possibilities with this Rams team. McVay is an incredible coach. But as of now, the injuries are forcing you to hit that panic button, and it's almost time to start looking at serious decisions about, will they ever be healthy? Will Cooper Kupp ever be healthy? It's a serious question. Will this team ever be healthy? You gotta start going back and forth on if it's time to start a true rebuild because of the injury issues with your core players. Anyways, on to the next team. And that is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals. And a lot of people panicked after that game against the Patriots. Understandably so, because the Patriots are a awful team. But they looked strong against the Chiefs. They should have beat the Chiefs. As per usual, the refs err on the side of Kansas City. I think the Bengals should have won that game. Regardless, though, they are 0-2. They are here for a reason. That first week was bad, and the second week could have been better. But yeah, no, I'm not hitting the button whatsoever. This team always starts off slow, regardless of whatever's going on. And we've seen them come back from it and still be a contending team. It's just like the panic button is not getting hit strictly off of the Bengals' claws of just like, oh, they always do this. They'll be fine. Is that fair? Not entirely. Maybe they don't do it this season, but until I'm proven wrong, I'll stand by that, because they've started off slow for 4 straight seasons, and outside of last season where they were injured, they've been contending every season. So no, I'm not hitting any type of button for them. They'll be fine, especially with how they looked in week 2. You're playing the reigning Super Bowl champion coming off of a great week 1 performance too. The Chiefs are a very good team, so losing to them in the fashion that they did isn't a big deal, especially since one could very easily argue, and I would argue, the Bengals should have won that game. I think they outplayed the Kansas City Chiefs. Whatever. I'm not worried about this team. This team will be fine. Maybe it's 11-12 wins instead of 13-14, but like, maybe it's 10 instead of 12, but I mean, still, this team is going to make the playoffs. I'm not worried about that. The only way that doesn't happen is if injuries strike them once again. On to the last team of the day, and one of the more interesting ones to talk about. On to the last team. There it is. The Baltimore Ravens. Oh man. First week they come out against the Chiefs, they look solid. Another one where it could be argued they deserve to win that game. Something that cannot be argued is that they deserve to lose against the Raiders. And this is a team that I'm not hitting the panic button on the season. The rest of your division is also having a rough start. The rest of your conference is kind of having a rough start. I'm not hitting the panic button on the season. I am hitting the panic button on John Harbaugh. And I hit the panic button on John Harbaugh a long time ago. I've been calling for him to get fired for the past 2-3 years. I don't think he'll get fired. That's probably not going to happen. At what point does Baltimore look at John Harbaugh's track record of blowing leads at least 3 times a season? When do they look at every big game coming down to coaching mistakes? They beat the Chiefs if they do not waste those 2 timeouts earlier in the game. They beat the Chiefs in the conference championship if the play calling is better. Time after time, the Ravens lose big games because of John Harbaugh. So in terms of the talent on the field, I'm not hitting the panic button, maybe other than the O-line because that looks horrid. Not hitting the panic button on the Ravens. I'm not hitting the panic button on the Ravens season. I think they'll still make the playoffs. I think they'll still win the division. I'm hitting the panic button on John Harbaugh because you watch him make decisions and wonder what on earth he is doing. The Ravens went down late in the game. All they needed was 3 points to tie it. Unfortunately, they only had 27 seconds. Imagine if John Harbaugh didn't throw a challenge flag on an obvious catch. They would have a minute and 7 seconds. Lamar Jackson is going to go get you 3 points in a minute and 7 seconds. Justin Tucker will get you 3 points in a minute and 7 seconds. The same thing happened against Kansas City. If you have those 2 timeouts, you have the time to go out and win that game. The penalties this season for the Ravens have been ridiculous. They've committed so many, and honestly, it's a thing around the entire NFL. If you have watched any game, you've seen way too many flags, but still, you'd like more discipline. John Harbaugh is the reason they have lost 2 games. They are 0-2 because of decisions that John Harbaugh has made. I think they'll be fine. John Harbaugh has shown plenty of times that he can go win regular season games. But yeah, I'm hitting the panic button on John Harbaugh and John Harbaugh alone because this team is a very stacked roster. The coordinators are solid coaches. But you were 0-2 because of your head coach not knowing how timeouts work. That's something that has to change by the playoffs and probably has to change even earlier. You play the Cowboys in Dallas for week 3. After these first 2 showings, are you going to tell me Dallas isn't going to be a close game? If Dallas is a close game, is John Harbaugh going to make the right decisions? From what I've seen, the answer is no. And Dallas, that's a solid team. The Ravens could be 0-3 by this time next week, and it wouldn't be too shocking after this loss to the Raiders. John Harbaugh should be on the hot seat. I don't think he is. Should be on the hot seat. Should be on the hot seat and should have been for the past couple years. Seems like he redeems himself just enough each season, and he's coming off of the best season of his coaching career since the Super Bowl last season. But man, Ravens fans are tired of watching them lose game after game because of coaching and not the players on the field. But that's all I have for today for the panic button episode. These 0-2 teams. Was your team on this list? If so, do you think they should hit the panic button or not? I mean, it's an interesting question to have here in week 2 for the most part, probably none of these teams actually need to hit the panic button. There's just some fun conversations to have with it. But I am going to have another one that has the pretender or contender with the 2-0 teams. And fans of 1-1 teams, I'm sorry, your team is boring. I'm not. Most of your teams, if there's something to talk about, that'll be in the week 2 reactions, not in these 2 little mini episodes that I'm doing, because 2-0, you're getting labeled as a contender on Instagram, and 0-2, you're getting labeled as like the worst team in the league by all your fans. So those 1-1 teams, not as much to talk about. If there is something to talk about, it'll be in those week 2 reactions. Thank you guys for listening, watching, tuning in. I will see you guys in the next one. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Wolf Den. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you on Spotify, make sure to follow the show and rate it 5 stars if you enjoyed it. Thank you guys for listening to this episode, and I hope to see you next time on The Wolf Den.